This through linking science, policy, and then of course you have the DRM. In this plot, or in this figure, we have essentially 4 major boxes. First and foremost, we have to have the science and technology, which cuts across those multidisciplinary sciences. The science technology will provide or will generate knowledge that can be used by policy makers, the policy actors, to develop policies and policy options and so on. In the middle, between science technology, as you see, and public policy is the decision support system, which is supposedly to facilitate as well as to make transfer of information more efficient. And decision support systems are again developed by research institutions, governments, consultants, and so on. And finally, once you have the science, you have sound policies, then you can get into disaster risk management, which are then in the form of actions, plans, shared vision, strategies, and so on. And this will be in particular in the form of what we call legal instruments, management instruments, as well as institutional roles. And if you look at this plot, we also have like a feedback loop. If the management component is not quite, needs institutional improvement, we can go back up. And if you have policies that needs technological advancement or scientific advancement, we can go back up the boxes. Now, just to give you some examples, going back to the major phases of a disaster risk management, mitigation and prevention is to conduct, say, risk assessment, land use and spatial planning, structural measures, ecological measures, public awareness and education. Adaptation is the adjustment of natural human systems to be able to moderate harm or exploit the beneficial opportunities of some disasters. Like, for example, when we talk about flora and fauna or biodiversity, perhaps we want floods. We want sort of moderate disaster to that effect, because we want wetlands to be around for this flora and fauna. When it comes to preparedness and alertness, we want monitoring, prediction, risk forecasting, organization and coordination, emergency operations planning, and so on. Response, we talk about alarms, alarm systems, life and property rescue, reduction of impact of disaster, information dissemination and communication. And the last phase, we talk about recovery, which requires reconstruction, retrofitting of infrastructures, rehabilitation of communication and transport systems, community rehabilitation, and other post-disaster analysis and management. Now, I'd like to come up now with a list of what we call institutional courses of action. So let me go through this in relation to those major phases of disaster risk management. First is to conduct multi-hazard risk assessments using new technologies like LIDAR, light detection and ranging for high-resolution topographic data, perhaps using GIS and computer modeling. We want also hazard mapping in flood-prone areas or debris flow areas through long-term field studies as well as dynamic time-based computer simulation. We wanted also to legislate laws and implement proper land use planning, watershed protection, and spatial planning. We wanted to adapt food production and water management that is resilient to extreme climatic events or hazards. Develop poverty reduction programs to provide affordable shelter, food, and water for resettled or relocated communities to reduce disaster vulnerability. We want also to develop reliable and effective monitoring, early warning and alert systems as far as alertness and preparedness is concerned, develop programs to enhance risk perception through knowledge and awareness of risk to improve compliance of individuals and communities with preparedness and evacuation plans. Establish and organize community-based planning and responsible teams during pre-disaster and emergent post-disaster phases. We also want to train and organize quick response volunteers to provide rescue, logistical, and psychosocial support. Develop evacuation plans such as routes, protective shelters, and food provisions in case of disaster. Conduct periodic drills and exercises for safe evacuation for local communities, schools, commercial, and industrial establishments. And as far as response is concerned, we wanted to organize, form, and deploy rapid assessment teams to inform quick and effective response actions. We wanted to set up evacuation centers that provide dignified living conditions to help alleviate the trauma that usually accompanies disasters. Distribute donations, supplies, and equipment according to needs appropriate to personal, social, and cultural values. Mobilize response teams, provide psychosocial support in trauma centers, assess extent of people affected and property damage, including an inventory of unaffected population. And as far as recovery is concerned, we want to provide manuals for reconstruction of infrastructure, rehabilitation of communication and transport systems, or retrofitting of structures to reduce collateral damage or repeated damage. Also to assist evacuees in smooth and safe return to their original homes or to alternative settlement in case the original settlement is still deemed to be at risk. And of course, continue psychosocial support for victims of post-disaster trauma, and finally, re-engineer food production and water supply. So where do we go from here? As far as being university academic institution, the question is how can academic institutions contribute in DRM? First, universities like UP, through its role in education, research, and extension, can contribute and should play a more active role in the affairs of disaster risk management. Second, long-term linkages should be established between universities and government agencies involved in DRM for continuous and sustained research and development, policy and management studies, and improvement of decision support system. Third, the university can serve as a catalyst for the networking of government agencies with international and private organizations for technical exchange, capacity building, financing of DRM strategies and projects. And finally, the university should partner with local government units, non-government organizations, or private organizations to establish an operational model or a field laboratory or a working example to demonstrate how disaster risk management can be done. Thank you very much. So I now call on Benny, our convener and moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Siringan, Dr. Lansigan, Dr. Tabios, Ando, Ino, and Glenn. We all heard very tight and fast presentations from our three colleagues today. You can guess that this has taken a lot of processing, discussion, even debates among the panel members, because truly, like an academic institution as we are, we deem that ideas, findings, recommendations are better processed by our community and turned into actionable recommendations. But discussion doesn't end from the presentations of our three colleagues today. In a while, we shall start the open forum from our audience here at NISMED, as well as the campuses that are joining us this afternoon. Before we take a question from the floor, we would like to request that when you begin you preface your question by introducing yourself, stating your unit or agency, and to direct to one of the presenters your specific question. We can take one question from the floor right now. But if not, while you are digesting the presentations this afternoon, I think we have already one question being phoned, or rather set online from UP Manila. UP Manila, please come in.
Yes, loud and clear. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
A pleasant afternoon to every one of us and every one of you. And here is our first person to raise a question coming from the NSTP class. Introduce yourself.
Good afternoon po.
Nakasit.
I'm Johannes Asis from UP Manila, first year.
Nakasan.
So here's my question. How can the government or concerned institutions utilize the budget allocated, if any, to solve the problems we have tackled? Where should the funds or resources be focused? Research, infrastructure, information dissemination, or any other aspect? So there's my question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we all heard your question
So
clearly.
this
Would
is
you
a
like to
question
direct?
from Mr. Johannes Asis, first year student, NSTP.
Thank you, Johannes. Thank you, ma'am. Would you like to direct your question to a specific presenter this afternoon?
Any presenter can answer.
In that
my
case, we
question.
will ask all presenters to give a short answer in turn. Shall we start with with Dr. Tabios?
That's a good question. Actually, if you go back to the major phases of disaster risk management, I think we should invest in all the components. We have to have pre-disaster management plans or actions, and also response and recovery. As I mentioned earlier, I think in the last few years, a lot of the investments were in the response recovery as far as disaster management is concerned. So funds should be invested in all spectrum of the disaster risk management components.
To spread the budget to all the components in some balanced way.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your good question. My answer is that the approach or the strategy should be holistic. In other words, as presented earlier by Dr. Tabios, we have to consider all the different phases of the response. And, well, we can no longer afford a trial and error approach here because we need science-based strategies and adaptation options. And therefore, we need to support R&D. It's not that we are researchers, but then we don't have to rely on trial and error. We need to make use of the advances in science and technology. Second, in the forefront are actually the local government units. We need to strengthen them. We need to build the capacity of the local government units so that they will be empowered or they have the capacity to respond to this. And this could be done through training and capacity building.
So to channel our budgets to both R&D people as well as local government people who would implement actions.
I echo the answers of the two other speakers.
That's what happens when you are the third to answer. In the meantime, maybe we can entertain a question from the floor today. Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself and direct your question to any of our presenters.